Shalom, Yasharallah. This your brother Dawudah from GMS St. Petersburg, Florida, coming back at you with this here truth again. First and foremost, I want to give all praise unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Ruach HaKodesh. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone that taught us this truth and that rule well. And salutation and much love for you, I can pushing this truth and sincerity in the four corners of the earth and enduring afflictions to feed and edify the elect. So I'm about to just follow up with the previous video dealing with, color of the Bible and why it's important and what color were the men of the Lord and the men that was in the scriptures. All right. So we're going to go back to the beginning. We're going to deal in the book of Exodus. All right. So getting back to this here lesson, this is the book of Exodus chapter 6. It's like Exodus 4 and verse 6. Well, I'm going to start at verse 4. I'll give you a little context to this. This is the Most High and Moses dealing with the Most High dealing with Moses. All right. It says, and Yahweh said in Exodus 4 and 4, and Yahweh said unto Moses, put forth thine hand and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand, and he caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. All right. Speaking about, I believe it was a serpent. All right. Let me just start at the top. All right. This is Exodus, never mind. For the time's sake, we'll just get to the point. Nevertheless, the Most High is coming to Moses, right? Let me just read verse 1. And Moses answered and said, behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, Yahweh have not appeared unto me. So the Most High, Moses is like, yo, they ain't gonna believe me. They're gonna, like, I'm crazy or whatever, whatnot. So Most High is like, all right, I'm gonna give you a sign, whatever, whatnot. I'm gonna show you, show forth, So going down to verse, 5 or verse 6, it says, and Yahweh said furthermore unto him, put now thine hand into thy bosom. All right. So now that bosom would basically be like your chest on your chest. All right. It says, put thou thy hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand on his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, it was leprous as snow. All right. So let me continue reading. He said, put thy hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand to his bosom, and he plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it was turned again to his other flesh. All right. So let me just get some definitions here. We could actually just go into the definition of leprosy and stuff like that, and that'll tell you, in the book of Leviticus. Yeah, we would have to go into, let me see. Nevertheless, I believe it's 14 though. But nevertheless, when you go into Leviticus, they give you the whole breakdown on, clean lepers versus just regular lepers, and just a layman's term definitions of all these things is, because they tell you that leprosy is gone or whatever, whatnot, and so on and so forth. But they hide it and they change up the names of it so that it wouldn't be obvious to what the hell is going on. All right. So let me put this in layman's term for you. It's easier for you to understand. All right. So a clean leper would be somebody that, let me get an example of somebody that we all know. Eminem, right? Or bad example. What's his name? Bill Gates. Bill Gates would be considered a so-called clean leper, all right? Because he looked like a regular so-called white man from head to toe, right? Regular fucking white man, right? That's a clean leper, right? Your regular everyday so-called white people that you see walking up and down the block, if you're just looking around, and look at him and be like, oh, he just white. That's what you call a clean leper. All right. Now, when you go into other situations where you have, because basically they have this all over them. But nevertheless, when you have somebody like in today's terms where they say vitiligo and they have these patches and things like that, that's where you have a little bit of a difference and things like that. So in reality, all these so-called white people are walking around, all right, as clean lepers. They just completely, in today's terms, how they would say albinos, all right? That's just basically what happened. When Esau was born, he was born basically as an albino. He had lost his skin pigmentation, his skin color, all right? So now going back into this here scenario, It says Exodus 4 and 6, and Yahweh said furthermore unto him, put now thy hand into thy bosom, and he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, it was leprous as snow. All right. So his hand, he put his hand into his chest, and his hand wound up turning white, like a so-called white man's hand. All right. And then he put it back, and it turned into his other flesh. What was his other flesh? The regular flesh that he had, the regular skin color that he had. All right. So let's go to this is Exodus 2 and 5. We're going to get into this, what color was Moses' other flesh, because it just said that he put his hand into his chest and it turned white, leprous as snow. And then he put it back in there and it turned back to his other flesh. So let's see what his other flesh was. This is Exodus 2 and 5. It says, and the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her handmaidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maids to fetch it. Now, this is basically, for a recap, the children of Israel was starting to multiply in the land of Egypt. There was a new Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph. All right. And he decided to deal wisely, basically implement what Planned Parenthood, more or less to say, and abortions. They was killing all the male child that was being born. All right. So, hey, nothing new under the sun. They did it when Yahushua was on the scene. They doing it today. But nevertheless, what had happened was his mom wanted putting him into a little, like how they say Moses came down the river in the basket, right? So nevertheless, the handmaiden now, all right, is in the damn river. She see this ark. She take the handmaiden, all right, verse 6. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, a babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children, all right? So basically, this is this is an Israelite, more or less to say, all right? This is how do I say what today is the speak we say Jake, all right? This is one of the Israelites, all right? And we know that Moses was a Levite, all right? It says this is one of the Hebrew children's, all right? And also going into the Levite, that would be today a modern so-called Haitian today, all right? So he was definitely, they'd be like, oh, the Haitians, they darker than dark, all right? He was definitely a man of color, but we're going to further prove that, all right? It says this is one of the Hebrews' children, all right? So, yeah, Moses was a Hebrew. Also, he was an Israelite, all right? Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter. All right. And he became her son. And she called him Moses because I drew him out of the water. So, let me see. Nevertheless, basically Moses is being raised up, hang on. Nevertheless, Moses was pretty much set up as like the grandchild of the Pharaoh. All right. Now, this was something that, for instance, let's bring this into modern day today. All right. Now, we all, not everybody know that Donald Trump, the one president in the White House with like goddamn 5 different baby mamas, you know what I'm saying, or multiple baby mamas, whatever, whatnot. Let's just say hypothetically, right? You got let's say George Bush in the White House, right? George and Barbara Bush in the White House, or Barack Obama and Michelle Obama in the White House. Don't matter. Either of those two. Now, let's say you got George Bush and them, and they, they a lot younger, right? And homegirl get pregnant, and then they have a baby, but the baby come out looking Chinese than all outdoors, right? Or the baby come out looking, like a Arab or a so-called black man. People are like, that's not your child. Same with Barack Obama. Right? If him and his wife wind up having a child, and the child come out looking Asian, so-called Asian, Chinese, white, whatever, whatnot, they'd be like, that's not your child. All right. So, but in this scenario, for Pharaoh to be able to have, Moses to be, thought of as Pharaoh's grandson. All right. They got to look alike. All right. So what color was the Pharaoh at that time? At that point in time, you could go back into the walls of Egypt and all those pictures and stuff like that. The men that was in Egypt at that point in time, and then they had different color skins. All right, because they painted them as dark-skinned people, and then they had lighter-skinned people, and then even so-called white-looking people. They had multiple different skin-colored people there. I believe they had like 3 or 4 different skin-colored people that they illustrated, but nevertheless, they illustrated themselves as so-called black people, dark-skinned people. All right. Then they also depicted on there having the Israelites in captivity in Egypt, and they also depicted them as so-called black people. All right. But nevertheless, going back into this here scripture, all right, Moses was raised as Pharaoh's, basically his grandson, right? So, people would look at that and be like, oh, that's the Pharaoh's grandson, whatever, whatnot. They wouldn't think twice because it wasn't nothing weird. It wasn't like a so-called white child or a so-called Chinese child trying to pretend to be the Pharaoh's grandson. Like, nigga, you don't look nothing like the Pharaoh. We don't even believe this shit. How you gonna say that's your baby? That baby don't look nothing like you. And what so-called Chinese man was you sleeping around with to get that baby? All right. They would just know off rip. So going back into Moses putting his hand into his bosom, turning leprous as snow, turning white, so-called white skin, putting it back into his bosom, and it's going back to his other flesh. His other flesh was comparable to the Africans or the Egyptians at that point in time, which was so-called dark skinned or so-called black skinned people as well. Now we are two different people, but nevertheless, we both had the same skin color. All right. Now, but going back to the Moses scenario where he put his hand in his bosom. Now, if Moses was a so-called white man and the Most High turned his hand regularly white, or if Moses was already he is a so-called man of color, a so-called black man, and the Most High just changed his skin to the same color, that's not a big deal. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like me telling you I'm your God. Like, look, I'm gonna show you that I'm your God. You know what I'm saying? Hold your hand up in front of your face, count your fingers. All right, now you done counting your fingers. You know what I'm saying? Now count your fingers again and see how many you got this time. Like, well, I got the same amount that I got beforehand. Like, you see, like, but you didn't do shit. You see what I'm saying? So the Most High did, something that was, how do I say? Like, if I was to give you the same analogy again with the fingers, put your fingers up. You know what I'm saying? You look and count 5, and then I was like count them again, and you count like 25, and I say you count them again. That would be something else. You see what I'm saying? So Moses' color and his skin color was as a so-called black man. All right. This is Numbers chapter 12, verse 1. And Miriam, which is Moses' sister, and Aaron, which is Miriam and Moses' brother. And Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman he had married. For he had married an Ethiopian woman. And so, Moses married a woman outside of his race, but she was also a woman of so-called color. So if you was to look at them from an outside appearance, they was both so-called black people. All right. It says, this is an appearance and skin color. Not saying they were the same people or anything like that. And they said I'm going to just get straight to the point. So basically, his sister, Miriam, was talking shit about Moses because he married this Ethiopian woman. All right. It says, Numbers 12 and 9. And the anger of Yahweh was kindled against them, and he departed. And the cloud departed from off the tabernacle. And behold, Miriam, his sister, became leprous. All right. Now, if you don't know what leprous is, they're going to define it for you. White as snow. Just like how it said about Moses with his hand inside his bosom. All right. It says, and the cloud departed from off the tabernacle. And behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. All right. So the Lord, the Most High, turned Miriam into a white woman. All right. And Aaron said unto Moses, alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not these sins upon us, when we have done foolishly, and when we have sinned. All right. It says, let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed, when he cometh out of his mother's womb. Basically like a stillbirth. You all pale. You already, you know what I'm saying? You ain't got no life inside of you. But nevertheless, this was Miriam's curse. She was turned into a so-called white woman. All right. And again, why would these things, if this isn't what it's talking about, then how big of a significance would this be? Why do they keep using these types of different references? Is going back to like, if you see a so-called dead white person, right? One of the ways that you could see like they was choked out or whatever, whatnot. They'd be like, yo, they dead. Their body turned cold. They all blue in the face and everything like that. All right. Or they just, they pale and blue, or they got that how they say that pale color to them, right? Miriam was turned to that same color. All right. She was turned leprous, white as snow. All right. Now we're going to go back to Joseph. All right, this is Genesis chapter 42, verse 3. Now Joseph was one of Jacob's sons. All right, these are the original Israelites. All right, they're not the children. They're the children of Jacob. They're not. Once the tribe started breaking down, but these are like the original. Jacob's kids. All right, and Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn of Egypt, but Benjamin, Joseph's brothers, Jacob sent not. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brother, for he said, lest peradventure mischief befall him. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn from among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was a governor over the land, and it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed themselves before him, and their faces to the earth. All right. So Joseph is basically second over all of Egypt. All right. There's a famine in the land, so everybody now coming to Egypt during the famine time, just like they're doing today in America. All right. When things get tough and things get low for other countries, they got to come to a stronger, bigger country or a nation to kind of help them out. They go to there for so-called strength. Same what's going on here in the scriptures. There was a famine coming in the land. Everybody was coming up towards Egypt to get their substance. Joseph being number 2 over Egypt. All right. This is verse 7. And Joseph saw his brethren. All right. And he knew them. All right. But it said Joseph, he saw his brethren and he knew them. He could recognize his own brethren. All right. Now you got to remember, his brethren had sold him into slavery. And he's now growing up in Egypt. It says, but he made himself strange unto them. And he spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, whence come ye? And they said, from the land of Canaan, to buy food. And Joseph knew his brothers, but they knew him not. All right. So why is it that a brother can't recognize a brother? Well, you could say, well, they was separated for some time. They grew up. They might have looked a little different. Yeah, that is a good reason. That's one little reason. But at the same time, from at a distance and so on and so forth. Again, Joseph being raised up here in Egypt. All right, and he's speaking roughly to his brothers and so on and so forth. He knew who his brothers was, but they didn't know him. Now, you had the Israelites and you had the Egyptians. The Israelites is completely different from the Egyptians. They had their own customs and everything like that, right? But what? Well, they didn't quite have all of this like that yet. But nevertheless, there was still a separation. But nevertheless, you had Joseph dressed in these Egyptian garbs, looking like an Egyptian, a straight Egyptian, so on and so forth, and talking to him probably in the Egyptian tongue or whatever, whatnot, speaking roughly to him, not as if that's your family. You see your people, hey, what up, bro? It's like it. What up, bro? That's my kinfolk. Y'all come up here. I'm gonna take care of y'all. Whoop-de-whoop. But nevertheless, he's speaking roughly to him. What y'all want? Plead your cause, whatever, whatnot. I'm like, oh shit. He knew his brothers, but his brothers knew him not. Why would his brothers not know? Why would his brothers not know him? Because again, like I said, he was definitely probably dressed up in Egyptian garb, probably spoke the Egyptian language and things like that. And, from a distance, they the same skin color. So you'd be like, oh, this is probably another Egyptian, Just like, hey, let me flip it and reverse it today. Let's take any, for you so-called black men, right? Take any of your cousins and take them out to damn Africa or something like that, to one of those African places, or Ethiopia or something like that, and let him learn that accent, in a language or whatever, whatnot, and dress up like that, You might see him from a distance and he talking out on a megaphone or on TV or something. Let's say you see him on TV speaking in a whole completely different accent, and all of a sudden, like, damn, who is that? You know what I'm saying? You don't know who it is, and all of a sudden, they revert back to the accent and the voice that you know. Because, you can recognize a person just off their voice alone. You don't even have to see them, But if, their voice and their accent change up, you know what I'm saying, their visual appearance change up, you might not be able to recognize somebody just so clearly, Somebody for a great deal of time in your life as being a so-called a big fat person. Now they get super skinny. You might not be able to recognize them. Same vice versa. Somebody that your whole life to be real skinny, get real big. You might not be able to recognize them. All right. So, let me see. From there, we're going to go to, this is Revelation chapter 1, verse 1. All right. Well, I'll just read for the edification's sake. Revelation 101. The revelation. Let me just get that definition real quick. It says this word here is apocalypse. It says laying bare, making naked, a disclosure of truth, instruction concerning things before unknown, used by events of which things stated or persons hereto withdraw from every view which is made visible to all, manifestation or appearance. Or let me think of another word, to be revealed. There it is at the bottom, to be revealed, revelations. All right, so basically, you know, like if you translate it back to the word that we know today as revelations, it's just to reveal. All right. So you can read it, the revealing of Yahushua HaMashiach, who the word English calls Jesus Christ. All right. So the revelation of Yahushua HaMashiach, which the Most High gave unto him to do what? To show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John. So let me jump down. Verse 13. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like to the Son of Man, who is Yahushua, who the world only calls Jesus Christ, clothed with the garment down to the foot, and girded, you know, he had a garment like how you see us on the highways and the byways with the same garment on, girded about the paps with a golden girdle. All right. Now, if you could think back to, like, if you used to watch wrestling and that Goldberg belt, that big WCW belt that Goldberg used to wear, that's what it's basically talking about, a big golden girdle about the paps. You know, he had a big war belt on, you know. It says his head and his hairs. All right, so his head and his hairs, the top of his head, like the hair on top of his head, and then also the hairs, which is on his face, like his beard, because we wore beards. All right, and also your eyebrows and eyelashes, like all that, you know. His head and his hairs were white like wool. All right, white like wool is giving you the texture that it is. All right, like woolly hair, we always comparable to sheep and things like that. All right, now who do you know has woolly hair? You know, they always talk about woolly hair or coarse hair. Nappy head hoes and shit like that. Who is known for things like that? All right. Who can naturally get an afro? All right. So-called black people. All right. His head and his hairs were white like wool. All right. Now it's going to go into the color. It says as white as snow. All right. You know, he had a head full of white hair and his eyes were like the flame of fire. You know, like when you see so-called Jake, you know, Jake, when Jake drink too much, or Jake be smoking or whatever, whatnot, they eyes be all extra red and stuff like that. Same deal here. You know, they said the Lord was a wine bibber, right? It says, and his feet, all right? Now, dealing with his feet. Look down at your feet. Tell me what color your feet are. Are your feet the same color as your legs? And your legs the same color as your chest? Is your chest the same color as, you know, your back the same color as your arms the same color as your face? Your whole body predominantly is one color, unless you got a certain medical situation where you might have certain spots. You know, like what they call that shit, vitiligo or whatever. But nevertheless, you know, John the Revelator is bowing down. All right. So this is why he's looking at his feet. It says, and his feet was like unto fine brass, as if it burned in a furnace, and his voice was the sound of many waters. Brass is already a derivative of brown. All right. Now, if you take anything, white piece of paper, whiteboard, white anything. All right, anything white, the lightest color you can get, and you burn it, it's going to turn. One way that you know it's burnt is just black, right? You have a hot dog on a grill, you know it's burnt because it's black, right? So if you have anything, you burn it, it's going to turn black. And then it's, you know, it's a double here. It says like unto fine brass, as if it burned in a furnace. All right, so one brown thing, and then you make it even darker. All right, the Lord was, you know, a man of color. He had dark colored skin. All right. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. All right. So the Lord, who the world only calls Jesus Christ, all right, he's a man of so-called color. All right. He had so-called black skin. All right. This is Daniel chapter 10, verse 6. Or verse 5. It says, I lifted up my eyes, and behold, Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz, which we was just reading the same description. All right, he was girded about the paps with a golden girdle. All right, it says his body was also like the beryl. You know, we was reading in the other scripture how he was girded about with well, he had his garment on, basically, more or less to say. All right, this is where the beryl is talking about his garment. All right, his body was like the beryl, and his face like the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire. All right, same description. And his arms and his feet, again, like I said, your arms same color as your feet, feet same color as your chest, chest same color as your back, back same color as your face. Your whole body predominantly the same color. All right, it says and his arms and his feet like in color. So first and foremost, they had color to them. He was basically a man of so-called color. All right, it says his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass. Again, going back to the brass. All right, he was a man of brass or bronze skin. All right, you could take a test and a method of this and go take a penny and put it on your hand and see what color, if it's close to your skin color or is it close to a so-called white man's skin color. All right, it says, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. All right, let me see. I think there might be a little bit more. Oh, actually, it's in Daniel 7. Let me go Daniel 7 real quick. This is Daniel 7 and 9. It says, I beheld till the thrones was cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit. Now, this is the Most High. All right, this is where they get that picture of, so-called God touching the hand of Adam. All right, which they covered those faces up too and painted them as white men. But this is where they get that image from. It says, I beheld till the thrones was cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit. All right, sitting in the, first of all, speaking on the characteristics of the Most High, you like, God ain't got no body. He don't look like this and that, this and that. Like, well, wait a minute. If he's sitting, all right, he got a throne and he's sitting on the throne. This is something that human beings do. All right, and it says whose garment. Now, wait a minute. If he ain't a human being, why he got a garment, or why is he wearing? He got clothes on and things like that. All right, whose garment was. Slakia. It says, damn, where was I at? Whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. All right, going back to the image of Yahushua, right? He had the same color hair and everything like that. All right, and his throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels a burning fire. All right, so more or less, the Lord was sitting there. All right. And they still said he had the head full of white hair and things like that. All right. Going to saying like Yahushua said, if you seen me, you seen the Father. All right. But they don't give you the description there. All right. So let me just continue on with this here lesson. We're going to go to the book of Judges. This is Judges chapter 16, verse 17. That he told her all his. This is dealing with Samson. All right. It says that he told. Now, this is one of the craziest stories that I think that we as so-called black people go to church and we read about this all the time, but we don't ever relate this to our own self. All right, we think some kind of way with some kind of Jedi mind trick that this is a so-called white man. All right, but all the characteristics of him is of us. All right, it says Judges 16 and 17. It says that he told her all his heart and said unto her, there have come no razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite unto the Most High from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like other men. All right. Let me jump down to verse 19. And she made him to sleep upon her knees, and she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off his 7 locks of his head, and she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. All right. So it says she shaved off his 7 locks. All right. Let's look at this word lock. All right. It says a braid, a lock, a plait of hair. All right. So this wasn't like a, how you say, a dreadlock, but this was actually like when you see, if you actually go back and you look far enough back into my videos, if you have, any old videos of me, like when, or on the highways and the byways, when I first came into the camp, I had my hair in, what they would call plaits or braids. All right. Like if you would go back, way back in the days, if you, some of you guys can remember in the so-called no limit days with Master P Bowdy and all that mystical. I had the so-called mystical braids. All right. These are what they are: braids, plaits, or locks. Meaning you can unbraid them and you can braid them back again. They don't. It's not just dreadlocks. All right. But nevertheless, what people on the planet Earth, even still to this day, wear that as a so-called as a hairstyle. So-called black men have different hairstyles that we've taken through history. From the afro, braids, plaits, and things like that. These things is predominantly. It's only known amongst our people, all right? It's not really known amongst all the other nations to ever do things like this, all right? And if you do see an image of them doing that, you would think that they trying to, how do I say, act or reenact being basically like a jig, all right? This is Acts 37, Acts 21, verse 37. And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak with thee? Who said, canst thou speak as Greek? All right. So first of all, Paul talking to this here captain, right? The captain talked real quick, like, oh shit, you can speak Greek? Now, first of all, why is this even put into the scriptures? This shit ain't important, or is it? This is very important because you got to think about the context. Now, if Paul was a so-called white man or a so-called Grecian, all right, if he was speaking to another Grecian man, the dude wouldn't jump back like, oh shit, nigga, you Greek? Nigga, I didn't know you was Greek. I didn't know you could, it's just like me as a so-called black man, you know what I'm saying? You're around a group of so-called Mexicans that speaking in Spanish and whatever, whatnot, and let's say they might be talking shit about you or whatever, whatnot, or maybe they not. And all of a sudden you start busting out in fluent ass Spanish. They be like, oh shit, nigga, you can speak Spanish? We don't think that because we looking at your outside appearance and you just don't strike me as somebody who would know this native language. So for a Greek to ask another so-called a Greek, which is at that point in time a so-called white man, to sit there and be taken back and ask another so-called white man, oh shit, nigga, you can speak our language, nigga? Hold up. I thought you was, how you speak Greek? All right. It says, as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? Who said, can thou speak as Greek? Art thou not that Egyptian, which was before these days made us an uproar and led us out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? All right. So he was like, damn, nigga, you can speak Greek? First red flag. All right. Paul wasn't a so-called white man talking to another so-called white man. He wouldn't have had that reaction. Second of all, he wouldn't have compared him visually just off his skin color as an Egyptian. All right. Just like, how people would be like, oh, well, I mean, from a distance, you see a so-called African and a so-called black man from a distance. You'd be like, oh, it's just two black dudes walking down the street. All right. It ain't till you get up on them and you actually start examining them that you be like, oh, they different. All right. And same thing with Joseph and being in Egypt and Moses, all right? And Yahushua, because Yahushua was born and had to go into Egypt, all right? Now, again, if they running from the so-called white man, all right, the Romans and the Grecians, why would you hide amongst so-called black people if you were a so-called white man? Running from another so-called white man. You would go hide amongst so-called black people, all right? It says, art thou not that Egyptian which before these days made us an uproar and led us out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? But Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew. All right. So he going back into what? Saying he's a Israelite. All right. So, and I believe he was from the tribe of Benjamin at that. It says, Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarshish, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, and I beseech thee to suffer me to speak. All right. Well, shit, let me go down. It says, and when he had given him license, Paul stood up on the stairs and beckoned with the hand to the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue. All right. So he was, he spoke Hebrew as well. All right. So let me, okay, but that's not exactly what I thought it was at. All right, but nevertheless, it's all good. Let me get to the next precept. I got about 3 more we're gonna close out. Romans. So give me 1 second. Oh, it's like it. Romans 11:1. Because I was speaking about Paul, right? It says, I say then, have the Most High cast away his people? God forbid, for I am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham of the tribe of Benjamin. All right. So, there's a lot of speaking talks about what the children of Israel being cast off. There was everybody being grafted in. Let me just continue on verse 2. God have not cast away his people, which he foreknew. What ye not what the scripture saith of Elijah, how he maketh the intercession to the Most High against Israel, saying, all right. But nevertheless, the Most High was not going to cast away his people. And this is in the New Testament spoken by Paul, right? So you don't have people saying, oh, that's the Old Testament, that's done away with, the Gentiles is coming in, so on and so forth. No, I was dealing with just the Israelites and all the way through, all right? Paul would have been a so-called, West Indian, Barbados, Trinidadian, Jamaican, one from out in those islands. That's the tribe of Benjamin, all right? But, he was just mistaken as the so-called Egyptian, just like how Joseph was and so on and so forth, all right? And Yahushua, all right? Well, not Yahushua wasn't mistaken for an Egyptian, but, he was born in Egypt. Oh, he wasn't born in Egypt. Let me get it. Right here. This is Matthew chapter 2, verse 13 through 15. It says, and when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and thou be there until I bring word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. And when he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt. And they was there unto the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, out of Egypt I have called my son. All right. So Joseph, Mary, and the Lord, all right, they was all taken in, they all went into Egypt, and they grew up in the Yahushua basically grew up for a little bit of time in Egypt until Herod died. All right. Again, you have these Edomites looking for so-called black people, and the best place to hide was where? Egypt, amongst other so-called black-skinned people. All right. This is the book of Exodus chapter 11, verse 7. It says, but against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that you may know that Yahweh doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. So yet we, on base level, we do have the same skin color as these Egyptians, Africans, you know what I'm saying? From a distance, yeah, we kind of do look like them, but really we have different DNA than these damn Africans, all right? For instance, African men, they don't grow facial hair, beards. They can't, all right? They're women. You never see they women with long hair. Their women always had a little short buzz cut. That's how their hair just naturally grows, all right? How do I say, these original Egyptians, the South Sudanese people, modern day today, they were really, really tall people, really, really tall people. Look up a picture of Manute Bo, all right, the basketball player. That was an original Egyptian. Like, he's what you would really call an Egyptian. That's what a real Egyptian would look like. And you can look at pictures of him versus real Jake playing in the basketball and in the NBA, where you have so-called tall Jake look like little small people comparably to Manute Bo, all right? There's a difference between the Israelites and the Egyptians, even though they were so-called black-skinned people, all right? Of course, there would be a difference between the Edomites and the Egyptians. One of them is so-called white, the other one is so-called black. That's already a difference, But what? Between two people that look just alike, and people would always keep confusing us the same, but there is a difference between us, all right? This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verse 15. It says, Yahweh thy power will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thy brethren, like unto me, and unto him you shall hearken. All right. Let me jump down. Verse 18. And I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren, like unto thee, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. So the Lord said from the beginning that he was going to raise up the prophets, right? The prophets was going to come from where? from out of your brethren, from out of your own stock. They was all going to be Israelites. All the men of the Lord, all the prophets, all the men of the Lord, they was all Israelites, every last one of them. And we just went through quite a few scriptures that show forth that all of them, you know, in previous scriptures, they talked about their skin color. Skin colors talked about in the Bible. All right. There was names and references that we use today, like nigger. They talk about that in the Bible. Then they also tell you about, you know, hiding amongst certain people based off of your skin color tone. You know, you hiding from so-called white people, go hide amongst other black people so you can't be found. All right, people that was mistaken, you know what I'm saying, for being a different race just because of they so-called skin color. All right. So just to go ahead and close out, you know what I'm saying, it's evident the color of the color of the men in the Bible, the prophets, all the men of the Lord and things like that, you know, is very evident, you know. Actually, I'm gonna close out with this here scripture right here. This is John. No, not John. 1 John chapter 4. Verse 20, it says, if any man say, I love the Most High, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love the Most High whom he hath not seen? And this is the commandment that we have from him, that he who loveth the Most High love his brother also. And so how you going to love the Most High who you haven't seen, but you hate your brother? But now, you know what I'm saying, you've seen the image of the Most High, the prophets, and so on and so forth. So now it's time for you to start loving your brethren, all right? And also to cut the fact of we not so-called black Hebrew Israelites. All the men of the Lord, the prophets, and things like that, before that Esau came in and started changing up our colors, we was all so-called men of color, so-called black men, all right? That's just what it is. But we're not here on based upon skin color. Oh, because you got black skin, you with us. Nah, because like we was just reading, there's a difference between us and the Egyptians. They had black skin too, but those are one of our arch enemies, all right? So with that, Lord willing, this here lesson was edifying into the elect. Until next time, I say, call halal Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shah, Bahashim, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone that taught us this truth and that rule well. And salutation and much love for you, Akim, pushing this truth and sincerity in the four corners of the earth and enduring afflictions to feed and edify the elect. Until next time, I say, stay strong and shalom.